Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles, here for our almost every week gathering of our plucky and proud and patriotic paid subscribers. The community that keeps this place going every week, and just incredibly grateful for all of you. It's just also fun to be here with all of you. I look forward to these gatherings every week. Sorry, we are an hour late. I was at a dinner, one of these Washington dinners with Senator Chris Murphy and a bunch of yuckity yuck people talking big thoughts. And so my head's bouncing around a little bit tonight coming back from that. And let me try to give you some thoughts about where we are, because we are in the middle of a moment here, right? The reconciliation bill may or may not happen. I've been scared, looking at social media to see if anything has changed tonight. And if any of you, if there are things that happen during the course of this discussion, please let me know. Yes, Chris Murphy. I mean, we all can acknowledge, and he's been incredible this year in general, but he's also really risen to the moment. And let me just try to. I'm not as perhaps coming here. I often have sort of a through line and a set of things that I want to say, and I'm a little bit less. Have a little bit less of a clear sense of what I want to say. So let me get this out and then let's get to questions. So I go back to a few things we talk about here a lot, right? One is that I do think this sort of basic moment we're in, there are two things happening simultaneously that we have to keep in our mind. One is that Trump is breaking things that are going to be difficult, if not impossible, to repair. And we have to keep working with just an unbelievable sense of urgency. The second thing is that I do think we're making progress. I think his decline in polling, which I went through today in the Post again, the fact that we continue to see us performing well in local elections and special elections, as we did in that period post Dobbs. You've seen now also the right wing, lose elections in Australia, Canada, Germany, Romania, keeping this pattern where in virtually every election since 2018, the right wing has failed to gain power, except in our presidential election in 2024. We saw the Europeans reject fascism in their elections, in the UK and France in 2024. And, we won in 2018, 2020, or won slash overperformed in 2018, 2020, 2022, 2023, early 24 with the Swazi race. Trump was underperforming his public polling the early part of the year. We did well down ballot in many of these same battleground states in 2024. We picked up a House seat. We did really well in North Carolina. And please join Anderson Clayton and I for a long discussion about North Carolina and the victories we've had there. Friday at 12:15, she's going to be joining us live. Our good friend will be coming back and doing sort of a reflection back now that the 2024 election finally ended in North Carolina just a few weeks ago. That we should be sanguine, that not excited, not satisfied, but sanguine that we have continually, pro-democracy forces have continually pushed back against the far right and against the fascists in virtually every election that's taken place in the Western world and in the United States, except for obviously the one that really mattered, right? The presidential election last year. There's starting to be more analysis now, new data coming out. I'm still sticking to sort of my basic take on 2024 that I've written about extensively. I think there's never one reason you win and one reason you lose. There's always lots of little reasons. And I still think, as Mike Podhauser wrote in his piece that he just posted today, that's very similar to the things we've been saying here, that I think the central reason, there were many reasons, but the central reason, or the most important reason, was that we failed to indict Trump adequately. We failed to bring both the ugliness of him and the ugliness of his agenda to the American people adequately. When we were able to do that in those Senate races and in North Carolina, we were able to win elections. It's how we won in 2018, 2020, 2022, 2023. And I think you're starting to see again that the sort of fear and opposition to MAGA, which has been driving our politics in the US and around the Western world, is reasserting itself as Trump himself becomes so profoundly and undeniably ugly, in terms of his domestic agenda here, with his ruinous economic strategy, his abandonment of the constitutional order, his dismantling of the federal government, all the things that he's doing here that have made him the worst president in all of our history. No one has betrayed the country and what this great country means more than him. And it's also creating politics against the United States around the world, right? I mean, you've seen this kind of rejection of Trump allied figures in elections. And so it's my assertion that, as it was prior to the November 2024 election, that once again, sort of Trump in all of his ugly glory has reminded everybody about why they hated this politics and voted against all of this politics again and again in elections in the US, and that he's in a weakened state. And that's good. And we needed that to happen. It's necessary, but not sufficient. And I also think that, as I've been writing, that I think this summer, I want to speak about this summer a little bit. I think that the dominant issue that we're going to have here this summer is going to be the debate around their economic strategy, not just the reconciliation bill, but also the tariffs. As I've been arguing, it has to be one thing. And Democrats, I think, are making a mistake. And I want to say this, I think they're making a mistake by only talking about the reconciliation bill, because the thing that's driving his poll numbers down are the tariffs and higher costs. And we should be connecting these things as opposed to keeping them separate, because it is part of one single strategy that he has, one single ruinous strategy. Sorry about this. For the country, that is slowing the economy down, raising prices for everybody, keeping interest rates higher than they should be, exploding the deficit, moving the tax burden of the United States from wealthy people to middle class and working people. All these things that they're doing, it's ruinous for the country. It's a betrayal of everything he ran on. And we need properly to stay focused in that arena, but we need to understand that I think one of the big mistakes we made in 2024 is not just good enough to talk about the economy, is that it's how we talk about it and what arguments we make. And in this case, I think we know from there was a poll done by the House Majority PAC showing that our arguments against the the reconciliation bill grow stronger when we tie them to the tariffs and raising costs and higher costs. This is not, I mean, to me, this isn't really rocket science, right? His numbers have come down not due to anything that we've really done. Let's be clear about that. It's really to a great degree about the anticipation of higher costs of working people. And so I think that we have to be, and what I mean by that is that, yes, we've been out here making these arguments, but we haven't run $100 million media campaign. We haven't introduced to voters this notion of his ruinous economic plan. They came to that understanding themselves based on their own life experiences, right? And then we have amplified that. We've reinforced it. But this wasn't something that we did on our own, right? We contributed to it. And so I think so number one is that I think for this summer, we're going to be in this place of having this economic debate, until they either crash their reconciliation bill or they pass it. And like I've talked to you before, in 2000, I was the chief strategist, outside strategist for the DCCC in the 2018 cycle when we flipped the House. We won that election at this point in 2017, in the summer and fall, when we debated the ACA and when they tried their attack on the ACA defined them to the public. And we did a good job at defining them and talking to the public about what they were doing with the ACA and why it was a betrayal of working people. And it tarnished their brand in a way they never recovered from. And we had a very strong election. We have an opportunity here to kind of lock in the negativity here into the Republican brand, which is why we all need to stay very focused on this job one, which is to win this economic argument with them and to get the Democratic Party, as I say, on the right side of opportunity. Number two, I think that we have to be sort of easier on ourselves a little bit. There's all these memes, because I read all your comments every day, I sort of am aware of a lot of the discussion that's happening in the family and how it comes out through your questions and comments and engagement. And there's this meme that, well, Democrats can't just oppose, they also have to propose. That's true, but in the way that we oppose, we are also telling the American people about who we are, right? In saying that we don't want an economic plan that raises prices on all of you and that shifts the tax burden from wealthy people to everyday people, and that we want, is telling people who we are and what our values are and what we believe. In saying that we don't think it's okay for Trump to be a mad king and to throw people into foreign gulags, and that we believe in the rule of law and due process, we're telling the American people about who we are. If we defend NIH and the attack on science that's going on here, and the idea that we believe in public health and we don't want to roll back the vaccine regimes in the United States, we're telling people who we are, right? We're conveying our sense of values. And I think that so much of the political discourse in this country, in part because of the power of the right-wing noise machine, and they're bullying the legacy media and the whole discourse around their themes and their memes, is that it's incredible to me how much our discourse is about how much Democrats suck when we don't, right? When we don't. I mean, we have been over the last 100 years this remarkable force for good here and all around the world. I mean, I have a whole presentation about this, which I'm going to reboot and start bringing back some of those themes. I showed the data in my deck the other day, something that in a post, something that Bill Clinton referenced in his convention speech. Since 1989, there have been, I haven't updated it for Trump's first few months, but since 1989, there have been 52 million jobs created in America. 50 million of them were created under Democratic presidents, basically all of them, and so we've been the party of growth. The Republicans, by the way, the last three Republican presidents have seen the deficit explode. Deficit's gone down under the last three Democratic presidents, right? They're trying to claim, the White House is trying to claim that the deficit went up under Biden. That's not true. The deficit went down under Biden, the annual deficit. So we've had three consecutive Republican presidents, throw the economy into the ditch. Recessions happened in their watch. Three consecutive Democratic presidents that have seen strong, powerful growth under their presidencies, managing the economy well for everyday people. And this idea that somehow the arc of the story of the American economy over the last 30 or 40 years is sort of this grinding, downward pressure on working people is fucking bullshit. It's wrong. It's not true, right? What happened when we were in power is things got better for working people through smart and progressive and liberal economic policies. And when they were in power, people that don't have economic literacy, there's not economics under their economic policy. What their economic policy is a social policy. They want them to have more and everyone else to have less, particularly those people. And that's what tax and spend is. And that's why their only focus really is about cutting taxes on them and making sure that those people have less. That's their economic strategy. What we've learned repeatedly is that drives the economy into the ditch. It doesn't actually work because it's actually social policy, something that's grounded and coming out of an evolution of the 1960s and the Southern strategy that became the governing strategy of the Republican Party. We can talk more about that. And so I think that one of the things that I just want to sort of push all of you on is that, yeah, we lost the presidential election and that we are down and it's hard and things are suck and Trump is doing incredible harm to the country. But what is also true is, and I was just, at a conversation yesterday at this place, and they were talking about how the Democratic Party needs, a complete total reboot from the ground up and all this other stuff. I just don't buy that. I just don't buy it. I mean, I think that and if you read my writing, right, I'm not telling you that that we don't have to improve and that we don't have to reimagine our politics and we don't have to rethink everything and we have to be open to new ideas and new leaders and younger people and the generational wheel has to turn. I talk about this stuff all the time, right? I'm not talking about status quo, but I'm also not in a place where I think this thing that I'm part of is bad or sucks or has done bad things to the country. We have repeatedly governed well. We've repeatedly left the country better than we found it. We have repeatedly done right by the American people. We built a global system that has created more prosperity and more opportunity for people in the world than any other system in the history of humanity. We've seen greater prosperity in the United States in recent years than any time in the history of the country. Lowest uninsured rate, lowest poverty rate, lowest peacetime job unemployment rate in the country, right? Huge increases, even with inflation in the last year and a half, a global phenomenon. We saw people at the bottom make the biggest wage gains of anybody, right? We made huge investments in the future. We have to defend this thing called the Democratic Party while also being open to improving it and making it better and more modern and more effective. But this sort of self-flagellation and this incredible ongoing beating up of Democrats, I'm fucking over it, right? And it is because it's inaccurate. I mean, as I go through this, I want to remind everybody the House Republicans have the smallest majority in 100 years, right? They have a very small Senate majority. Donald Trump barely won this election, a couple 100,000 votes in a few states, and we win the election. In the last nine presidential elections, we've won more votes 7 out of 9 times. They haven't, we have been consistently breaking 50 at the presidential level, something that they have struggled to do since the 1980s. And so I just think that as we go forward here, we just like we can have two ideas in our head. And I'm sorry for getting a little animated here. Um, but I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, to use that term, right? Is that it can be true that he's doing incredible damage to the country and we have to be and we have to be working with great urgency, and it's true that he's losing steam and losing power and we're gaining strength, right? We've been winning all these special elections and these local elections. Both of these things can be true at the same time. What can also be true is that we are not where we want to be, but it doesn't mean that we suck, right? I mean, it doesn't. And so what you can say is that, and I think we have to figure out how to get to a place where we have this language. With Democrats, things get better, all the things we talk about here. And then finally, the summer. Um, I think we need to not only work really hard to win this debate with them, but I think we need to have a summer, and I've been thinking about this for myself too, and for all of our mental health and our ability to stay in this fight over a long period of time. We are out of the sprint period. We are out of the 100 days. We are out of the shock and awe. And I think it's really important that, we have a summer, that we as you and I, all of us, have summer and have enjoyment and picnics and vacations and can find, the joy of summer as a way of countering the ugliness that we're seeing every day. I mean, even just today, right? I mean, just what a day. You know, we had the South African president openly mocking Donald Trump to his face in a way that the idiot in chief wasn't even aware of. He said, "I'm sorry, I don't have a plane to give to you," right? It was one of the most amazing moments of Trump's time in public office. And once he figures out that he was getting mocked, by an African, I think it's not going to go very well. But Trump was just full of false and wrong propaganda today, embarrassing the United States. Trump has also made it very clear in the last few days that they are taking Russia's side in the Ukraine war. They're not playing it neutral any longer. An extraordinary and perhaps unprecedented betrayal of the United States and everything that we've always held dear. We know that the courts, they're continuing to they flew a bunch of migrants to, of all places, South Sudan. I've been writing about this the last couple of days against court orders. They violated court orders. They violated also a level of morality and a level in language. I don't even have language for this, and I have to find language for this. But the attempt that we are now in this ferocious, frenetic attempt to ship hundreds of thousands of people in who live here in the United States, many of whom are here legally in the United States, to war-torn zones that the United Nations will not return people to because it's unsafe. The idea that we're trying to send people back to Afghanistan and to Yemen and to Ukraine and to Cuba and to, you make your list, Sudan, right? It is fucking barbaric. I mean, I don't know why this has gotten to me so much over the last couple of days, but it really has. It is crossing a line. And as I said last week when we were here, Maybe we all should have paid more attention. We were told that, oh, you can't really care too much about what's happening with USAID. Voters don't really care about that. USAID and the vaporization of USAID put the United States on the side of mass death around the world. Millions and millions of people are going to die because of what we just did and by vaporizing USAID. And I guess that once you can do something like that and be okay with that and believe that's a legitimate form of action in the moral universe that we all live in, then there's nothing left that you wouldn't do. If you're okay with millions and millions of children dying because of your actions, because of you, as Bill Gates said the other day, it's a bad look for Elon Musk, the wealthiest man in the world, is causing the poorest people in the world to die, right? Is that once you've crossed that moral line, then there is no moral line left to cross. It means that they're okay with mass death here in America, as Donald Trump was okay during COVID with that in 2020. We remember, right? It's okay. You would be okay then with starting to roll back the vaccine regimes. You would be okay with keeping brain dead women on, in alive in order to deliver a baby for 3.5 months, right? You would be okay with these things. And I think that we are facing now, and part of what has been kind of overwhelming to me in the last few days is just the sense of just evil, of evil, of malevolence, of maliciousness, of just something that feels outside the Western, that is outside of morality, right? Of and certainly Christian teaching, right? And I want to be very clear, right? That where the current pope, sort of went after Vance and Trump before he became the pope on Twitter in a very public way, and those tweets are still up. You can go look at them, right? Bob Prevost, Prevost or whatever, however you pronounce his last name, Bob, Cardinal Bob, was on this issue, right? It was on this issue of the way that they were treating migrants and the inhumanity and way the administration was both treating migrants and then creating the justification for horrific activity. And so where I end up here is that, you know, I I am I'm angry. I'm angry at what Trump is doing to all of us and to the country. I'm angry at the future that he's stealing of my kids and their kids and their grandkids. I'm angry that these guys come and just lie with such impunity every day and show so much contempt for all of us. I'm angry that it's been harder for us to mount a successful opposition, even though we've made incredible progress. We're not anywhere near where we all need to be, right? We all know that, right? This is an assumption every day. We don't need to repeat it again and again and again. I'm angry that he's siding with Putin over Zelensky and is, you know, putting America on the side of a genocidal maniac like Putin. I'm angry that that our leader has offered a plan for Gaza that is absolute genocide and inhumanity on a scale that is almost perhaps almost been, there haven't been many instances in all of human history, the kind of thing that Donald Trump is now proposing to remove millions of people from Gaza and putting them in a place like Libya or wherever the fuck they're going to go, right? I'm angry at all that. And I'm also frustrated that I can't be doing more. And as much as I feel that with all of you, we're doing incredible things and we are together, I want to be doing more. I want to see more progress. And yet I also know that we need to have a summer. I need to have a summer. I haven't had much time off in the last 3 years. And, I need to go on a vacation and I need not to write and live in this shit every day for 10 days. I need to have more weekends. I need to go hang out with my wife now that we're empty nesters and have more. And she's not working, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, my daughter's home, my son's home, my other son is coming home, visiting in a few weeks. We're going to try to spend time with our kids this summer. We're going to rent a house and go surfing and other things in California. And we need to give ourselves that. It's really important that we find that balance, right? And I know that I'm going to do it. And I just want to encourage all of you to do it too. Look, this work is incredible. You need to be here every day. But, we all now know this isn't going to be over in September. We're going to be at this for the next few years, and we got to pace ourselves. And and that's really important. And so let me get to questions. That's it. And let me close by saying thank you all. Many of you have heard me say this many, many times, but what is literally true, and I don't want to in any way, this isn't bullshit coming from me, is that I and this all of us want to feel like we're contributing to the highest ability that we can right now in this time of crisis for America. You all have allowed me to do that, right? Your financial support, the community that we've built together. I spend so much time reading all the comments because it just makes me happy and fulfilled to see all the work that you're all doing and knowing that there are hundreds and hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of people all across the country, doing Tesla takedowns and doing the No King's Day on June 14th and all the things that all of you are doing, the amazing work. Deborah Potter just wrote this incredible letter to Bernalillo County. You know, all of you are doing incredible things. And the blessing that I have to be able to read about that and to get this affirmation that Americans are going to work, rolling up their sleeves and fighting for their democracy every day. It's the fuel. This is my fuel, every day to the comments that you all leave, the self-reports. This is keeps me going. It inspires me. It makes me want to match your ardor and your intensity and your love of country, with my own. And so, I do believe this chat is as crude as it is. We can't put pictures and everything else. This chat that we all have together every day has become really special and important and energizing and powerful. And so stick with it, right? I mean, stick with it. And I do think that one of the things I want to ask you is that I'm going to come to you is that I want to try to grow Hopium this summer. I want it to get bigger. We've seen the explosion of new media offerings, huge changes in positive, important changes in our media landscape. And I've been trying to figure out our lane, right? Like, where do we fit in all this? I mean, do I have to bring on three or four big collaborators and other things? What I come back to is that we've built a really cool thing, and we should get more people into it. And it doesn't mean that we're ever going to be as big as Midas Touch, or we're not going to produce as much content as the Contrarian, but we're doing amazing stuff together. And I'm just really grateful for all of you. And I want to work with you to expand the universe of people who are involved with this, because I do think that Hopium may be a narrower or smaller offering, but it's a powerful one. And I want to bring more people in to give them the opportunity to be part of this thing that we're all part of. So thanks, everybody. Let me get to questions. And Lincoln is going to summarize for me, as he always does. Let me go first to him. Yeah. Um, yeah, look, No King's Day is coming up the 14th. I know many of you are involved in that. It's terrific. It's great. Um, I also am going to start after this week going back to my owning the fourth thing, which I've kind of left off a little bit as we stayed focused on the reconciliation bill. I'm also trying to rewrite some of the activity stuff. I feel like it got a little stale, and I just haven't had as much time. I've been really trying. A lot of my energy in the last couple of weeks has been on this economic stuff. I mean, some of you may know my NDN, the think tank that I ran, its core work was around global economic policy, trade policy, domestic U.S. economic policy, immigration. And so these are issues that I've worked on as a professional for a long time. And I think this is an area where we add unique value. I think many of the other commentators on the center left don't have the kind of economic and policy grounding that we do here at Hopium. And so, I'm going to stick with this. And I think this is where we're adding a lot of value in the discourse. I was sat next to Gene Sperling tonight. For those of you who don't know Gene, he was a 92 war room guy, Clinton economic guy, Biden economic guy, Obama economic guy. He's the one who brought these pictures of me from 1992 that I showed earlier. And we had just a brief chat during dinner tonight, and Gene spoke a little bit, and I really agreed with a lot of what he said. And but we have to win the economic argument this summer. It's the big one. The second thing I want to get at, because it gets to, I meant to talk about this in my opening remarks, because it gets to some of the questions that have come up. I can't tell you how much Trump has kind of hacked our information ecosystem in the US. It's a combination of this huge right-wing noise machine that's been built, their ability to sort of intimidate other actors in the system where they know that if Trump comes after you or says something, you know that what that means is you're going to get swarmed and overwhelmed, right, by stuff. But it's also this thing that I've talked about chasing the new that I just want to go back to for a minute because I think it's really important as part of us staying even keeled in the moment. The last couple of days I struggled to write the morning post because A, there was a lot going on, and also, I don't want Hopium to become a place where I just recount all the stupid and bad and horrible things he's doing every day. There are other places that are doing that, and they're growing, and they're getting, but they're like a dopamine hit, right? Like, you go in and you get your like, oh, you see that crazy shit Trump did today, and you go read about it, and it gives you, thrill, it gives you fear, it gives you whatever, right? And it also gives you knowledge and understanding of what he's doing. I'm just not going to do that at Hopium, right? We're just not going to do that. I don't want this place to become where I chase the new, where I'm chasing the latest outrage, because that's what he wants you to do. He wants you to spend all day chasing all the crazy shit he's doing. And we have to come to a greater understanding as an opposition that when we share and delight and communicate in our networks, the latest terrible thing that he's done, which is not structurally any different or worse than the 5 things he did in the previous 3 days, right? It's the same story. It's just a new chapter of the same story. That when we spend our time talking about that, and did you see this? And like, can you believe this, right? We're doing MAGA's work for them. We're doing Trump's work for him. Because what we're not doing is that we're not staying focused on the things that matter, like, the economic plan and, or his selling out of the United States to Russia or his abandonment of the Constitution. We have to stay in a place of narrative and story and not sweat the details because the details aren't changing all that much every day. I mean, the details are changing every day, but the narrative isn't, which is that he's an unprecedented danger to America and that, the latest iteration of the thing, right, that he does is is it's unimportant. And we have to render it unimportant in our own understanding in order to start to depower, to power him down, to lessen his influence over our consciousness and our discourse every day. We have to start every day in our truth and our understanding. We're a strong party. We've done remarkable things. We've been winning elections and not starting from a place of, did you see all that crazy shit he did, after 8 o'clock? Because one of the things you notice about Trump, by the way, is they make news all the time. They're making news in the evenings, they're making news on Saturdays and Sundays, right? Because that's part of his psychological hold over all of us. And so I just want all of you, as you think about your news diet and how you consume information and how you stay up on top of all this, there is a little bit of a thrill to be watching this kind of train wreck unfold, right? It's like rubbernecking at in an accident, right? Where, you get to connect with the ugliness. But I think if we're to overcome, we have to constantly pull the curtain back from the wizard, remind everybody the emperor has no clothes. We have to take control over our relationship to him. And that relationship is that he wants you thinking about him 24/7, 365. He wants you thinking about nothing else. He's a narcissist, but he also has a media machine behind him that makes that possible. And, the whole reason, one of the central reasons I founded Hopium was to create an alternative way of engaging in this information discussion every day where we were starting from our place and telling our story first and not responding to them. And this is still really important, right? Because when you let others set the table and set the agenda and you're responding to them, then they're in control, then they're in power. He understands this, by the way. He has a deep understanding of this. And most people don't want to have the love of their fellow Americans, that they don't want to be in their head all the time. They don't want to be fucking with them. They don't want to be dropping crazy news at 11 o'clock at night, right? Terrorizing people all through the evening. They want to do the opposite of that. They want to leave you alone. They want to let you live your life and cook your dinners and drink your wine and do your other things. That's not what he wants. He wants to be in your head all of the time, pushing negative, terrible stories to get you down, to depress you, to cause you demobilization, to cause you to run, get into a ball in the back corner. And I will tell you that I had, one of those days yesterday where, I was sort of overwhelmed with the ugliness of it all. And what I do, some of you know Tug, who's over my shoulder here, over here, right, passed away in February. And Tug and he was 12 and a half and he lived an incredible life and he's my buddy. But in the mornings when I would get stuck, I would go hang out with Tug and he would help me get unstuck. We'd play, he'd do stupid games, we'd chase balls and, other doggy things, right? And, and I talked to my wife about this yesterday that I don't have Tug and I got to figure out a way that when I get stuck in the morning, like how do I get unstuck? And it's not to drink another cup of coffee, right? Because it's not, there's a limit to how much coffee we drink. But the reason I'm saying this is that we have to create more dialogue in our networks about taking back control of the information environment from them. And some of that is about understanding that what they want you to be doing is hitting that button about the latest outrage all day long, like and being like, Pavlov's dogs, right? Boom, 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 boom. And then you're not actually doing any work. It's also freaking you out and you're becoming intimidated. And that's what they want, right? They want to fuck with you in your relationship to the country and to your life, right? And I need to do a better job at figuring out I'm not talking about this as articulately as I often do, but I just have been really feeling in the last couple of days that they've really dominated the daily discourse in the country in a way they haven't in a while. Like he's been very in our face the last few days and the last week, and maybe it was the foreign trip and just the craziness of that trip. But, this is a big power he has, and, we can't match it, right? Our ecosystem isn't strong enough. Yes, Midas Touch and Contrarian and all this, but it's nowhere near where their ecosystem is. And our leaders, our legislators right now, they're not taking up as much space. And so I have felt a little bit like in the last few days, in a way that I hadn't, that their sort of information superiority kind of reasserted itself a little bit in recent days. And that worried me. It worried me a little bit, and it also reminded me about why, this community matters so much, right? That we are doing our part at putting truth and into the discourse every day and helping people understand about how to extricate themselves from this kind of spell and hold that they have over all of us through their information superiority. This is something we need to talk about more. I mean, this was a central reason I founded Hopium, and when I founded Hopium, right, Midas Touch was small and Courier Newsroom was small and Lincoln Square was small. There was no contrarian, right? Brian Tyler Cohn was small. I'm doing an event with him tomorrow at 4:45 Eastern time. We've now all exploded, right? And everything has gotten, there's so much more now. It's almost too much for you to look at every day. It's still not sufficient, you know? And we have a lot of work to do. And I feel like, we haven't had a Cory Booker moment or a Chris Van Hollen moment, or, we haven't had one of those galvanizing moments in the last few weeks that have kind of lifted us all up. And we're in desperate need for one now. And I'm looking forward to the June 14th protests, because remember, we're doing those in part because our idiot in chief is having a military parade on his birthday just unbelievable that we even have to say things like this. Um, and so thank you for all of you who are working on this. But again, the other thing I think we found from these protests is that they're necessary but not sufficient, right? They're important, but there's all this other work we also have to be doing. And I'm really proud of all of you for spending the time you have in contacting your members of Congress, because I still think that that work, we know from Cory Booker and others, these calls into these offices, this unrelenting calls that we and others have been doing, it's real, it has shaken things up and it really matters. Um, yeah, I got asked earlier tonight, uh, someone lobbed in a question. I am working and I'm behind, and there's a bunch of things I'm behind on right now. Um, but I'm working on, I would like Hopium's contribution to the rallies and the protests to be based on doing something with allied groups at HHS to protest the attack on science and academia and public health, because it's something that isn't being done, and there are a lot of other things that are being done and that are being done well, right? But I think this is an area that I'm going to be spending time on, particularly the next week, to see if we can create some kind of regular every 2 to 3 weeks kind of thing at HHS with speakers. And I don't know the permitting and the legality and everything else. We have to figure all that out. And I'm going to leave that to people that know this. But I hope that's something that we can do. Someone mentioned Hopium Health. I think it's something that if you guys can be talking about in your own networks, there are places in the country that have more of the kind of scientific and medical infrastructure than other places where, I'm still a little shocked that we haven't seen doctors and scientists start to become a more organized force themselves. I think that's going to happen. I think the shock and awe has been so brutal, and people are just trying to maintain their labs and their institutions. But we need the scientific and academic community like Alan Garber did at Harvard, to really start becoming an organized force. And I know, and we're still a ways from that from happening. I will say that another question, just in that vein, um, that's what was I going to say? Oh, and then the other thing is that I am going out to speak. Jane Klebb, the new chair of the chairs, has invited Tom Bonnier and I to do a presentation next week to the state, all the state Democratic chairs at the Clinton Library, where they're having a meeting of all the Democratic chairs. Ken Martin will be there. I'm going to be out there for a full day, seeing folks, taking temperature, maybe do a few interviews. We'll see if I can pull that off. And then some version of that presentation will come back to all of you. Tom and I spent some time tonight on it, working on it. But a lot of the stuff that I'm going to say is the stuff I'm saying here with all of you, and it will be just packaged. But Tom's working on a few things that will, I'll bring Tom back in here. We'll do something together when we get back. The other thing, yeah, okay, let me go to other questions and let me see what else Lincoln's got for me here. Um, Yeah, and let me just go into the Q&A. Olav had mentioned that you guys can't see the Q&A. I didn't realize that, and I will try to figure out a way to make that more visible. Um, yeah, Diane raised this question about speaking to the low polling of the Democrats, the Democratic Party now. I feel like I've addressed this a lot in my writing, and I think this is something worthy of discussing, is that Um, the low polling, we don't actually have low polling in the way that it's being described in that post. What we have is that and if we had low polling and if we were not well liked, we wouldn't be winning in places like Omaha or Wisconsin, or overperforming in special elections. And so what you're being told by people in the family is that, and by Republicans, is that, yeah, Trump may suck, but Democrats may suck more. Well, then why did we just blow it out in Omaha? And why did we blow it out in Wisconsin? And why did we overperform in these House elections in Florida? And why did we overperform in all these other special elections? And people have to be careful that there is this kind of part of the family, as I was saying earlier, that is very invested in talking down the Democratic Party and sort of beating up the establishment. And, there's great danger. I mean, look, we need to change. We need to evolve. We need to move forward. We need to have a debate. But this way that the low polling has been manipulated, in my view, by some, is that yes, on some questions, Trump is trusted more. But Trump just had the lowest polling of any president in the history of polling in the first 100 days. As I showed today, he has the lowest consumer sentiment ratings ever in the University of Michigan survey, going all the way back to the early 1960s. We are not lower than that, right? And if we were, we wouldn't have just won this Omaha seat and doing all well and this other thing. The low polling comes from there are Democrats who are disappointed in the Democratic Party. That doesn't mean those voters aren't going to vote for Democratic candidates. And that's why what I've shown you is last week, one of the most credible data guys in the business, G. Elliott Morris, who ran 538 and has now got his own Substack, did his own polling, high quality polling. It was a little bit more Democratic than other polling. But on the question of do you want the Democrats or Republicans to control Congress, or who are you going to vote for? Is the question. Who are you going to vote for Congress? We were winning 47-41. And so what the data shows is that yes, there's a chunk of Democrats disappointed in the party. It's not surprising. We just lost the election to this crazy guy. But this idea that the party is weak is wrong. It's wrong. I mean, we just wouldn't, again, be in actual elections, right? We wouldn't be performing like this. We wouldn't be ahead in the congressional generic like we are. And that's why I think that my recommendation to all of you is that we need to have this balanced view, right? We're strong. We've done amazing things. We've been winning. We've been beating MAGA again and again and again, overperforming. We didn't win, right? And we have to modernize, change, reinvent, all that stuff. But it can't start from a place where we suck because we don't suck, actually, right? I mean, that's just I really feel this has become like almost a performative thing because if you say it, you raise more money from Democrats, right? And you can grow your organization. And I'm just not going to do that. And I'm not going to do it because I don't think it's true, actually. I want to be really clear. I don't think it's true. I think that we had a disappointing election. That doesn't mean we suck, and I think we have to find better language to accurately describe the place that we're in right now. Certainly if we sucked, how come we've won more votes in 7 out of 9 presidential elections? I mean, the way that people describe the Democratic Party is as if we just lost 50 states and got 3% of the vote in the election, and that's not what happened, right? And so yes, I am not in a place where a lot of other people are in the family right now. There is an incredible amount of energy right now in the family of people beating up on the Democratic Party. I'm just not there. I'm not there, A, because I'm an establishment guy and I've been here doing this, but I'm not there because I actually don't believe it's true also. And I think this other thing that I'm trying to describe is true, which is that there's a difference between being sucking and disappointing, right? Like if you can use whatever language you want to use in this, we all know this in our own lives. We're not an irredeemable bunch of fuck ups, right? Like we didn't have a good election, but we did do well in these Senate races. We did do well in North Carolina. We did pick up a House seat, right? We did well in 2023 and 2022 and 2020 and 2018. So, the idea that we're like terrible and everything is horrible is, that's what MAGA wants you to believe, right? And that's not what we should believe. And I also just don't think it's true. And I know that there is an incredibly powerful information ecosystem right now that exists in our family where anything that a Democrat does that is somehow seen as being, not adequately fighting Republicans becomes amplified like unbelievably. I get it, right? I see all this stuff in our chat every day. I think that's, the utility of that over time is, I think, limited. And that, we have to go, for example, we've got this big election in Virginia. If you guys are freaking out, I hope everyone here tonight gives to Abby Spanberger. I mean, this is a make or break race for this party. We got one big Titanic election in November, and it's in Virginia. We have a great candidate, and all of you should be on board that race. If you're angry and pissed off at the party, and help us win and do work, volunteer, do postcards. Many of you are writing postcards for Abigail right now, right? We're going to have a nominee in New Jersey in a few weeks. So that's going to be another kind of huge Titanic race. The Virginia race will likely be closer than the New Jersey race. We should win the New Jersey race. And so, we've got things we can do now, right? That will matter. And so I'm glad that that question came up because it is on people's minds. And um yeah, let me see what else. Yeah, I mean, the Medicare, I know there's been an incredible amount of discussion about Medicare tonight. Um, I don't, I mean, do we think that that's the worst thing that's in this bill? I mean, do we think that, or that Medicare getting a big hit is worse than the tariffs? I mean, it's just, again, it goes back to this idea that it's a detail and it's a piece, but the story is plutocracy, shifting tax burden, right? More for them, less for us. And we have to stay in that place of narrative, right? And not, yeah, a lot of bad stuff came out in the process of them writing this bill, but this bill is terrible. We've been working against it for weeks. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, the Medicare stuff is bad. I don't know that it's going to stay in the House stuff. I mean, in the Senate side, and frankly, it's not in any way remotely close to the worst thing that's in this bill. And I've been frankly a little surprised that it's gotten so much attention today because I think it's actually not the most important place where we need to be going right now in denigrating and degrading them. It matters, right? But it's not. I think there are these other places that matter more in my view. And I, again, it's this idea of not chasing the new, right? Like this new thing comes and we got to spend all day running around with our hair on fire when this bill's a fucking catastrophe and we've been working against it for weeks. Yeah, it got a little bit worse, but this is not somehow something that's transformative in the ugly nature of this bill in my view at this point. um yeah, Ron asks a question about how big does, if we win in 2026, how big does the win have to be? We just have to win. We can like squabble about the size. I also think that we have to work to try to put the Senate in play. I think we have to see whether or not we can, I interviewed, uh, Haley Stevens today. She's a leading candidate. There are other candidates on our side in that race. And, in Michigan, we're going to need to win that Senate seat the way that we need to win the democratically held House seats that we're raising money for. And we have to start the first part to winning it back is keeping what we have, right? And then, starting towards the end of this year, building towards the new candidates and the people that we need to flip. We did a good job at that last cycle, right? I mean, we were very involved in helping flip 7 House seats and raise tons of money. And we were among the largest fundraisers for House candidates in the whole country. We were the largest fundraiser for Ruben Gallego in the country, the largest fundraiser for the North Carolina Democratic Party in the country, the largest fundraiser for the Nebraska Democratic Party in the country. We did a lot of really important things. And I think I'm going down to Florida to do an event with David Jolly in a few coming weeks. That's going to be a very potentially interesting opportunity for us this cycle. I think he has the ability in this cycle in particular to make Florida competitive. I don't know if we can win, but certainly, we have the road back to becoming competitive there is, starts with us having a great candidate like David. If you haven't watched that interview I did with him, strongly encourage it. And I will put in a pitch. I mean, in the last couple months, I mean, we've had tremendous, wonderful people on here, who are all people that are going to be playing important roles in 2026. I mean, we just had the leading Democratic candidate in the Michigan Senate race, and we had Jane Klebb, who's one of the most important figures in the Democratic Party, and David Jolly. And, we've had a great group. And we're going to be doing, 2 or 3 interviews a week, probably no, not less than that, probably not more than that. We've got Anderson Clayton coming Friday live. Please join us for that. That's going to be a great event. Um, is that, and let me just go to see if I can get, um, a few more questions here. And Olav, I'm sorry, I didn't know that the questions were not visible to all of you. I will I've been doing this for 3 years and I didn't know that. I will see if I can figure out how to make all the questions because the questions are wonderful. And you guys, um, the no, Angie, I want to say I'm not worried. I'm not talking about the triggering of the pay-as-you-go act. We have to just defeat this bill, right? I mean, like, it's just one more reason we have to defeat the bill, right? Like, it's just, yes, they snuck in a new thing. I don't know that it's in any way worse than all the other things that are in there or the tariffs. And it's just there. The whole thing we've been focused on here is that it's about Trump's economic agenda. It's not any one piece of it because the thing that Wall Street is balking on right now is the totality of his agenda and what it would do. It's not any one piece of it, right? And the reason that Moody's downgraded the United States and you've seen this sort of the Fed really challenging Trump on his economic approach is it's because of the totality of the economic agenda. It's not any one piece of it because the tariffs are slowing the economy down. They're raising prices across the country, weakening consumers. They are, making our keeping interest rates high. They're weakening our safe haven status, which is very much related to the issues around debt and deficits. And basically, what's happened is that because Trump did the tariffs, it means that this bill they want to do cannot pass because it would be so reckless and dangerous because of the huge increase of the deficit when we're already in a deeply weakened position, globally. And that's why Moody's downgraded our debt. It's not because of any one piece of this. It's because of the totality. And I think that what I have been arguing, the simple way that I've been trying to present this, is that I do think some version of, them, that they want more for them and less for everyone else, while also bringing in, ruining the economy for the American people. We've got to keep it simple in that way. And I think that any time that we isolate out any one piece of this as opposed to talk about the totality of it, our argument gets weaker and not stronger. This is my view. I am not speaking for sort of the majority view in the party right now, and I'm not in a place of agreement with some of my brothers and sisters about the way to message and talk about all this. But I've also been talking about economic policy and messaging around it for 33 years and at a very high level, starting on the Clinton campaign in 1992. And I think that we have to recognize that the markets are losing faith in the United States because of both the tariffs and the reconciliation bill. And the truth is, the biggest break on Donald Trump and what he's been doing has been the bond markets and the global markets spitting back against his outrageous tariffs and spitting back now against the reconciliation bill. This is what's causing the Republicans to have heartburn. It isn't cutting health care for seniors and for poor people. They don't care about that. This isn't something that matters to them. What they care about is that, they're in the process of destroying the economy of the United States, and people have sort of figured this out, and they're getting enormous pushback from, global markets, foreign leaders. Trump, how many deals did Trump negotiate? He said he was going to get 90 deals in 90 days. His family's cut more deals for themselves than they have for the American government during this time. They actually haven't negotiated a single trade deal. And so, we are up against this sort of ruinous economic strategy. This is what I write about every day. And yeah, I mean, the Medicare stuff is bad, the Medicaid stuff is bad, but it's the totality of the agenda that's bad. All the pieces together, right, is what makes it so reckless and dangerous. It isn't any one piece of it. And so I think we have a lot to work with here. And that's why I said at the very beginning, we're going to be spending the summer having this big debate with them, and we need to win it. But if we think we're going to win it by, I think, staying focused on Medicaid and Medicare, I think we'll be not operating with the most powerful tool that we have to win this argument with them, in my view, because the thing that is spooking Trump has been what's the market response to his outrageous tariffs, the disruption of the economy, the deficits now that the reconciliation bill will recognize. So try to spend time. I've been trying really hard to help give you the understanding of this, right? I mean, in my commentary and in my writing every day and bringing on outside experts. And I think that we're going to be, as I said in the beginning, spending the summer. I think if we can close on this, is that we need to do two things this summer. We need to win this economic debate with them, and we need to have a summer, right? Like we need to allow ourselves to enjoy life and to be out in warm areas and go swimming and, do whatever it is that makes you happy during summertime, vacations with family, these places that matter to you, go back to a place that's always been one of your happy places, right? Like we need to find joy and happiness in all this ugliness. And I think that summer is a unique time to do that. And I think so we need to both, we need to have a summer and we need to win the big economic argument. I think that's really would be a great set of goals for us as we go forward. And we need to grow the hopium community. It's something I'm going to be talking more about in the coming days. So love you guys. Keep fighting. This has been an amazing journey. Let me just end with this. Where's the pictures? Here's me smoking a cigar. Wait, on election night in Little Rock, Arkansas, in 1992. A little thinner, a little more hair, and certainly a lot happier than I am today. But enjoy that as a way to close. Love you guys. Take care.